Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. You're in the right place, the perfect place, if you're looking for a wellness check-in team whose goal is to remind you to think about wellness and encourage you to make wellness a priority. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well.
This is episode 29.
A territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people as part of a reconciliation process. We make our podcast from lands located within the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. We are treaty people, responsible to honor the original caretakers and to serve as stewards for the land.
So today we have a guest co-host, Elise Seifert. Elise, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm great. What's on your mind?
Well, I've been thinking a lot about this book that I've been reading, and it's about Indigenous trauma in Indigenous communities and how we can heal from that.
Okay, what's the book called?
It's called Legacy, Trauma, Story and Indigenous Healing, and it's written by Suzanne Methot.
Okay.
So I've been reading this book for some learning that we've been doing in my school community. We had a book club surrounding this book, and there was a part of the book that I highlighted on 2 different chapters. So I think it must have resonated really well with me. And it's kind of the practice, the driving force of a community.
Okay.
And the Indigenous belief is that it's driven by 4 R's.
Okay.
I think it would be great if we could have someone from the Indigenous community talk to us about this subject. But for now, I'd love to share my impressions of what I had read. So the 4 R's are respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and relationships.
Okay, very good. And reciprocity is?
Giving each other something for mutual gain.
Right.
And I like to think about, what can I do for you so that you can help me? And I think maybe we get focused in on money with that, but I wonder if we can think more about how we can help each other. Mm-hmm. And that helps.
What do you need? What do I, can I give you something that, is there something that I can do for you? And in return, yeah, for sure.
And I had read these 4 R's and I thought, what a beautiful community-driven approach to a classroom. Maybe I'm a teacher. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to just sit down with my students and say, these are the 4 R's that we're going to follow in our classroom. And what does respect mean? Mm-hmm. What does it look like? How do we respect each other? And what does responsibility mean? Mm-hmm. What am I responsible for? What are you responsible for? And just referring to those 4 R's are what drive our classroom. And it's just such a beautifully community-driven practice.
Definitely. Yeah, that's something that we need to work more on, I think, is community, working together.
Yes.
To be prosperous.
I had thought about our society is really, to me, it seems almost ego-driven. Mm-hmm. I need to do this so I can make money, so I can have property, so I can have...
Exactly. This is my property. This is my stuff. Like
my cars, we're very driven by materialistic items. Uh-huh. And what if we took more of a community approach, and how would our community look different? And I believe that it would look better. Mm-hmm. I think that we would be more supportive of each other. And I think that it would help with things like mental health, homelessness, but these are big goals. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So initially I had thought, small scale, what would this look like for me in my classroom? And I think it would look beautiful, but also what would it look like for my school? What would it look like for my board? And then I thought, what would it look like for our community?
Yeah. Well, speaking of a small scale, like we all can do our part. So this quote I really like that you told me. The most common way people give up their power is thinking that they don't have any. Mm-hmm. And that's a quote by Alice Walker. And that's so true, that we think we're just one person. We can't do anything. Like we can't really, but it's like the ants. They're just little ants, but they work together and they do great things. And I think that we need to think more like that, or try to think more like that. And one person can turn into 2 people, can turn into 1,000 people, and we can do this.
Yes.
And we definitely have seen this in the past with gay pride and working on that, and bringing all these issues into the limelight. So I think we can work on environment and community too.
Yes. And I think it goes with the 4 R's. Like, it seems kind of daunting to try to change things yourself. Mm-hmm. Thinking, this is my belief, this is on me, but with the 4 R's, there's just such a focus on what we can do together. The reciprocity piece, the responsibility piece, respect. I mean, all of them. Relationships is one of the 4 R's, but yeah, just thinking instead of just, oh, how can I fix this? This is so daunting. There's nothing I can do about it. Thinking of helping as a community. And that quote, I think, is so powerful because, yeah, a lot of people think my voice doesn't matter. What I think doesn't matter. And people say things like, I didn't vote because it's not going to change anything. But thinking that you don't have power is really what's...
Yeah, you're giving up your power by just thinking you don't have power, but your vote does matter. And yeah, so all this is true. And speaking of community, the other quote that I have here is community creates leaders. Leaders do what the community wants. So we have the power to vote in our leaders or to express our opinion to our leaders and make our voice to our leaders. And then they will do what we want because they want to lead and they want to get voted in. They want to please us so that they can get our vote. And so you do have power.
We do. And yeah, it's truly the communities that create those leaders. It's not really the leaders who shape the community. And I think often we think about that. We think about the one person in politics and how they are affecting our community, but really it's on us to share what we need as a community. I think another quote that was from that book as well is, being a leader does not mean that an individual has to be perfect. I think a lot of times leaders are held to a higher standard, and anytime they do something that might not be perfect, they are blamed and they're, oh, well, that person did this and they must be a terrible leader now. But we have to remember that everyone is a person. And I think that goes along with that respect nature of the 4 R's and how we have to respect the humanity of every person and understand people make mistakes.
Yeah. And yeah, we're not perfect, and they shouldn't have to live up to that high standard of perfection. And we should be helping them or not being part of the problem, being part of the solution. Yeah, for sure. That's definitely, I said that, I have that conversation with John all the time. I think that it would be a very difficult job to be a leader because owning my own business, I was the leader and everything falls on you. No, even if you didn't have anything to do with it, it's your fault. It's your problem. It represents your business. So you have to deal with it. And it is really hard to always be responsible for everyone and everything in your small group. So I give kudos to leaders and politicians, and it's hard to live in that glass house. And
yes, there's always going to be someone who doesn't support this decision that you made.
Always. You cannot please everyone, and you try and please the masses, but sometimes the masses are just the ones that speak the most, the one, the
loudest,
loudest. Yeah. And those often aren't the ones that need your help.
Yes.
So yeah, you got to listen to everyone and maybe go out and hear everyone. And yeah, so very true. Well, that's really interesting. Let's just say the 4 R's one more time.
So the 4 R's are respect, responsibility, reciprocity, and relationships to help build a healthy community.
Okay, well, this week I'm going to learn those 4 R's and try and do them every day. Thanks,
Wonderful.
Elise.
Thank you.
Our interview today is in the area of artistic wellness, and we are welcoming back Shirley Madill, who you'll remember is from the Kitchener-Waterloo Art Gallery, which locals refer to as KWAG. You'll remember that Shirley is the executive director of KWAG, and she held previous positions in other art museums in Canada, including Winnipeg, Hamilton, Victoria, and St. Catharines. She was past president of the Board of Galleries Ontario and past president of the Canadian Art Museum Directors Organization. She's the vice president of the Board of Arts Build Ontario. She's published extensively, she's presented many papers, and her curatorial work included numerous exhibitions. She's taught courses in 20th century Canadian and modern art, history of photography, and other topics. And her awards include the Ontario Association of Architect Award for the Future Cities exhibition in Hamilton, Ontario, during her tenure at the Art Gallery of Hamilton, showing her interest in the role an art gallery can play in the development of a creative community. And welcome back, Shirley.
Thank you.
So
Pleasure.
the secret that I'll tell you now is that I'm going to hope to persuade you as time goes by to come back and chat with us a little more. It's such a great opportunity to have a resource like you when I consider artistic wellness so important. So hopefully I'll get a chance to do that. But to set the stage, we previously talked about a really nice program, Feast for the Senses. But I want to talk just generally about what I think there might be out there, which is a connection between the arts and wellness. And not just in the sense of participating in creating art, but enjoying art, whether it's paintings or sculptures or whatever it is. And we've been exploring the theory on this show that can help contribute to a person's wellness. So I'm wondering if I can ask the general question that in your experience, do you see that happening? Do you know of programs that make the connection? Do you know of resources or studies or anything of that nature?
There's been a wealth of information and studies nowadays that surround what are the good practices that really substantiate the impact that arts have on health, and that is physically as well as mentally. Many of these studies have been done in the United States, the United Kingdom. I think Canada has come in a bit later, in that realm, but certainly impacted what many art museums like ours are doing currently. So, I guess many of us know that there's always been this divisiveness between art and science, right? There's art and then there's science, visual arts and science, and yet they're more connected than one would think. But when some of the studies have found that when art has been removed from, let's say, a community, for example, there's been a substantial increased use of mental health services. Now, this is interesting. The art went down, those services in need, and so behavior problems and so forth, came forward. And so through those studies, through, many programs that do connect the visual arts with, let's say, social service organizations and health organizations, have really proven that there is alleviation of isolation, a boost in self-confidence, reductions in fear and anxiety, for example. Social networks are, improved when you're at a gallery with a social group, for example. So there's also an understanding, or more understanding and compassion, and interculturally, for example, that brings it out through the visual arts. So the messaging and the research out there has been pretty extensive.
I remember, so Sheila and I have a little section of the show where we chat about things, and we like to chat about art. And we had come across an article in the Wall Street Journal that was connecting art, the visual arts, to wellness. And there was a story in it that really surprised me, which was, I think it was Bill Murray, the famous comedian. He credits art with saving his life, that he was much younger and very depressed and considering suicide. And he went to an art gallery and he saw a particular painting, and that kind of brought him around. And that sounds similar to what you're saying in terms of, affecting people's stress levels and mental health issues increasing when it's absent.
It's not only the viewing of the artworks. You see, the artists are really attuned to our, environment out there, whether it's the social, landscape, the cultural landscape, or so forth. So there's a lot of messaging that occurs in the artwork, and art museums are very helpful in being the conduit and a venue for, further development. So it's not only viewing the artwork, it's also the programming around it. So, for programs that we've conducted for well over a decade right now with seniors, Gather at the Gallery and Alzheimer's, it's also been proven that with the visual arts and actually practicing the visual arts, you don't have to be a professional artist to do so, really activates the right side of the brain. And by doing that, the seniors do develop a kind of confidence and a connection to the artwork that relates to maybe their past or the telling of stories, for example. They feel less isolated, feel less anxious, for example, in being in that environment. The more that you bring art into your daily life, the more that you're going to reap those benefits from that.
So are you saying, for example, that there's a seniors program where maybe seniors are creating art as opposed to coming to the museum and enjoying looking at it?
Well, they do both. They will actually see an exhibition, and then from there, taking again, inspiration from the exhibition, or putting it on a personal level, and then sharing what they've made. And I think that the workshop is very much about association. You see, when you're putting something together, like a collage, for example, you are building associations, and in often case, maybe you're piecing together something from that past. So if Bill Murray says, he was struggling, we have a youth council, for example, and we also have youth at risk, for example. And you'd be surprised what the art experience can do for youth at risk in terms of getting that messaging out or expressing themselves where they can't do it verbally, for example. So it just reaches so many levels. And many of the artist educators who could be also art therapists, work within that realm.
So let me just take a few examples just to go over a couple. So are you saying that there's a program for at-risk youth where they do something artistic?
We have a youth council, and we like the youth council to run, but also we work with social service and agencies like the Resilience Project, Family Center, for example, where they can incorporate their youth into the programs that we do. And they have a voice. And I think that this is important. It's their voice. We may run a program, but they actually can direct our program. Not a teenager anymore. I don't know.
Right.
We think about the teenager youth wants. So, we have the youth lead that way. So we know exactly what we can do to help them out.
I remember at one point too, I was chatting with you at one of the events and you mentioned something about autism. Are there programs where art combines to help people or work with people with autism?
Actually, our public programs department has been working extensively over the past 2 years with Autism Ontario, and particularly with adults with autism as well. Very successful and very rewarding. So this has been, I would say, fairly recent over the 2 years and during COVID.
One thing I wondered too is, do artists ever, do they ever get to know what people are experiencing when they see their work? So if art goes into museums, so for example, I was just recently at a Feast for the Senses, and there was an amazing piece by a young high school artist. She wasn't there that day, but it was really amazing to see. And there was a whole bunch of pieces by kids at different levels of school, and some of them just blew me away in terms of how amazing they were. Do they ever hear about what people are saying or thinking about their work?
This is the Expressions exhibition that's been going on for 47 years. And the gallery is like 66 years old, right? It's pretty incredible to have an exhibition of student work. So it really it's a real tribute to the kind of work that the art educators are doing in the schools and also what the gallery is doing across that way. So the caliber of work that you see in Expressions is astounding. I mean, I could actually admit that when I saw that work, I thought, is that a work from our collection?
Right.
Because you think, I don't remember this artist, in our collection. Do they get responses? Usually with the parents and caregivers and grandparents and aunts and uncles coming in, you do get a lot of response. I don't know whether they hear everything, because people, are coming in and making the responses, but Expressions would probably get a great deal of response from, people. Whether the students hear about it, it's usually at the opening, of the exhibition rather than outside of it.
I like to keep a list of quotes, and I sometimes talk about that here. And when I see a good quote, I throw it on, and it kind of reminds me, there's one to the effect that the arrow no longer belongs to the archer once it leaves the bow, and the words no longer belong to the person once they leave the lips. And I take it the same with art. You put it out there, and you may or may not have a reason. Maybe it was just what you were feeling and you're expressing it, but maybe you had a thought. But I guess once it goes out there, you just never know how people receive it.
Oh, most artists are totally aware of that. They know that, there may be a purpose to behind the reason for their work, but how a visitor responds to it, can have a lot of personal relevance, right? When looking at it, and certainly make a difference in their lives in some way.
Now, the other thing I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the KW Art Gallery is anyone can just go in and look. There's no admission charge. Is that correct?
It's we have free admission thanks to Sun Life Financial. So they've been able to, have us open the door and accessibility. So it's been a real plus for us. They've been with us for over a decade.
And for anyone who's listening, who's in the Kitchener-Waterloo area, it is in Center in the Square, correct?
That's right. Center in the Square.
So anyone who's listening, you can go down anytime you'd like and have a look around. The exhibits change regularly over the course of the year, so you'd be able to enjoy different shows. And Shirley, we're there again. We're at the end of the show where we whip through things. You know the question I ask every guest from the last time you were here, so I'm going to take another run at it. In terms of how you're doing now, are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of one thing you can do to foster wellness in that area?
Well, I'm going to go right back to where I was. I need to go outside more, and I need to go to those favorite natural environments like the waterfront. There is something about taking a walk in the woods. There's something, where I live, there's a trail behind me, and then I can go right down to the waterfront. But I would add to that, I haven't been on my bicycle for 2 years, all right? And that's shameful. It's in the basement waiting for me. I also have to get on the bicycle and out of the car and onto the bicycle.
It's one of the favorite things that I do. So I like to run. And one thing you probably already know this, but if you look at some Google Maps or if you look at some City of Kitchener online trail maps, there's some beautiful trails all over Kitchener, and you can find miles and miles and miles, or should I say kilometers and kilometers of paths and trails, and hopefully you get a chance to enjoy them.
Yeah. And there's one more thing. I mean, again, I love fly fishing, and I haven't, this has been a big neglect of mine. I haven't gone out fly fishing for over, I think, 8 years. And that is one of the most Zen experiences, if you love doing that you can ever experience. I could be out there 8 hours and not know what time it is.
I think I'm going to put that on my list of things I'd like to do. It's not a bucket list, but just a list of things I'd like to do. It does seem like it would be very Zen. It's the whole thought about having to continually throw the line out. You're in nature. It's quiet.
It's quiet. It's so peaceful. And there's something nice about being in the water up to, over your stomach and just throwing. And you're just, hear sounds of nature. It's fabulous.
Okay. Well, thanks again, Shirley. I really appreciate your time, and I hope the listeners learned something and we all can enjoy art, and hopefully it helps us both physically and mentally.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. A few years ago, a friend of my mum's was involved in a short film called The Black Donnellys. For those who aren't in the know, it follows the tale of a family from the London, Ontario region that basically had a slow descent into trouble and crime. It's a cool story. You should check it out. But my mum's friend said, "Hey, I'm in this thing, and they're hosting a contest where you can submit a song, and if it wins, they'll use it in the film, and you have the opportunity to attend some of the premieres and perform the song live. You should see if Cameron wants to try." So Mum passed this on to me, and to be honest with you, I wasn't really feeling it. I was at a time in my life where I was out of school, but not really confident in myself, or my musical abilities, or what I was doing with my life. But I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity to try and get something moving. So I sat down and I started writing ideas, and the first few just were not good. They were bad. They didn't fit well. They were too rigid. The style was all wrong. And I knew they weren't good, but I desperately wanted to get something out there that worked. And after 5 or 6 of these that just sucked, I was about ready to throw in the towel. And that same afternoon, when I was about ready to hang it all up, this wave of, not inspiration, but an idea, it crashed into me and stuck. And so I followed it. I went with it. And the idea was, if you follow the story of the Black Donnellys, they descend into this troubled situation. It's, a slow descent into trouble. And they get further and further away from who they once were. So the concept I had was, like fading away, long gone. And that's what ended up being the title of the song, Long Gone. If you're curious, you can check it out. It's on Spotify, Apple Music, all that stuff. The lyrics are pretty clear. They follow the story, But the music, I really wanted to capture that same vibe. So it opens kind of sparse, slow, low, big, droney cello, raw sounding. And the vocals, it's very spacey. And as the song progresses and gets further and further into it, there are more and more vocal layers that are layered further and further away into the mix. So by the end of the song, you have this huge, far away feeling, long gone. And as the song winds up, it all boils down to the one word, gone, which floats away into the empty space. As it turns out, the director was really, really excited about it, and the song ended up winning the contest and being used in the film. So I got to attend a few of the premieres and perform it live. It's kind of cool. One of those things I never thought I would do, and definitely didn't think I would succeed at. But there you go. Sometimes creative inspiration, you just got to run with it. That's it for me today. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We could really use your help. Please spread the word about us, and importantly, connect with us on our Instagram or Facebook page. We were hoping to start conversations not only with us, but between our listeners. That hasn't really happened yet, so help us break the ice. Don't be shy. Make a comment, share a thought. Tell us what activities foster wellness for you, in what areas. Let's connect.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
I was having lunch the other day with a work colleague, Tushar Anandasagar. He mentioned something, a kind of physical activity I'd never heard about before. So I said, Tushar, why don't you come talk to me about it on the podcast? Because I'd love to hear more about it. He said something about sledding and doing things backwards. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about that, Tushar?
Thanks so much for having me, John. My absolute pleasure. So sledding, why don't we take it at its most basic form? The way that I see it is just moving forwards or backwards. You're pushing something or you're pulling something. Depending on your particular setup, it could be some sort of a cart. You could be towing your old used winter tire down the driveway, going forward or backward, pushing or pulling. And in my view, it's one of the most basic, fundamental, and beneficial human movements. It's a closed chain movement. You're doing something that is outside the norm. You're not used to it. It's right down on the ground, so you have to get low. And it's a closed chain exercise. What I mean by that is there's no time for a break, really, because you're pushing from your tip of your toes right up to your fingertips and engaging your entire core, whether you're going forward or backwards. Hoping that's making sense. In essence, it is pushing or pulling or towing, whatever you can do to move mass, including just moving your own body if you're starting at that level.
And it was interesting because what happened was I was talking about how we're trying to encourage people to get out and move. And you said, well, what got me out moving was this concept. And I'm really getting into it and I'm really enjoying it. So I can't help but wonder, how in the world did you get into this? Like, what happened?
Pain. So I was in pain. I was tossed around as a teenager and into university playing rugby. And so I've got this old sports injury that affects my lower back on the left side. And so it rears up every once in a while. So I started investigating, as we do, and I found a specific protocol whereby individuals who reverse movements that cause them pain. So if you're bending forward, it causes you pain. What do? You reverse the movement. You move backwards. That's actually how I stumbled upon this concept of sledding. And then basically you start with walking backwards and you move slowly through it at your own level. As you progress, you start to develop quite a lot of strength in the key pain points that I'll say affect most people who are working desk jobs. So ankles, knees, and hip. Those are bundled areas of concern for individuals who sit a lot, who drive a lot, who are in that sort of hunched forward position, who may be suffering from upper cross syndrome in the shoulders. And so when you're moving in this particular fashion, it kind of unpacks and unwinds a lot of pain points and stress points in your body that normally are just sitting in a specific fixed position for most of the day. It basically pumps blood around to the back parts of your body. And then the benefit of it is once you're comfortable there, because balance is so critical, you want to focus on the front. You don't want to strengthen the back and have it too strong. So you actually do. There's value in moving the sled the other direction and actually pushing it rather than just pulling. I personally started with pulling because of pain.
Can you maybe, just so people can picture this, you mentioned the tire, but can you maybe explain maybe a couple things you're doing right now on a regular basis as part of this process?
So the tire is a great example because it's something that you can picture, and a lot of folks will see people lifting and turning and pushing and pulling tires. That's fairly common. Another option, if you are looking at a modifier, is to use a dumbbell with resistance bands and anchor yourself. So you can actually hook yourself up in essence to a treadmill, and you can resisted walk forward or backwards under a load. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a tire. Another option might be there are purpose-built sleds which have internal resistance or wheels, and you just have to push this thing and it pushes you back, or pull this thing and it pulls you back, and it creates resistance. If I can put a mental image into the mind of the listener, imagine you are trying to move a car that is stalled, and you are throwing your entire body weight behind it, and you are forcibly leaning forward and loading up your entire body in order to move this mass. That is the general intention behind the movement. And then in reverse, you are hooking yourself up, usually by the waist, and towing the car and using your quads, knees, ankles, your glutes, etc., right up through your posterior chain in order to move that same mass. That's the basic premise.
So if people are interested in finding a little bit more about this, what are some of maybe the search terms they could look for to find out examples of exercises or safe ways to do it or equipment you might need?
Certainly happy to share that I cannot take credit for this at all. I found this protocol, I'll call it a protocol, via an organization called the Athletic Truth Group. And so if the listeners will Google the Athletic Truth Group, they'll find all of this stuff online. YouTube videos, Instagram, TikTok, manuals, ebooks, all kinds of stuff, and quite a lot of resources. And critically, if you are coming from the starting point that I was, where it's painful just to even move, they have modifications right through to how to load it and, bump up your resistance strength. So you can start from, I'm barely capable of moving, right up to, this is causing me to, result in a flop sweat.
Okay, so we are just about out of time, but before we go, how are you feeling now? And can you see yourself doing this for a while because it makes you feel good?
Absolutely fantastic. And a recommendation is bring a friend. If you have 2 tires, that they come in sets of 4, grab a couple extra tires and turn it into a game. Who can get up this hill towing this tire as quickly as we can? And you will sweat like you wouldn't believe, John.
So you mean you're actually pulling a tire that's on the ground up a hill?
Dragging it against the friction of the road on its side up a hill.
Well, that sounds amazing. Well, thanks so much, Tushar, for joining us today. And hopefully we've encouraged somebody to get out there and move that body.
Thank you so much.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. This isn't really a pop-up because it didn't pop into my head while running, other than the idea to do this. It's been a bit challenging for me to put myself out there on the podcast. It will have been worth it if listeners are getting something out of the podcast, but I'm probably stepping over the line here and will likely regret putting something out there that's so personal. So here's the context. Sheila and I went through a challenging time in our marriage in the early 90s. Not that we didn't get along. It wasn't emotional distance. It was physical distance. I was accepted into law school in Kingston, Ontario, which is about 360 kilometers from where we lived in the KW area, or about 225 miles. Sheila taught dance at multiple studios in KW, and her students wouldn't move to Kingston. So we decided that I'd stay in a dorm room in Kingston at university while Sheila stayed at home. She was working multiple jobs and caring for our 2 children. Our third was born some years later. And it was challenging to be apart, but we made it work, and we also learned that there's a lot of truth in the saying, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So this is all context. What's all this about? Sheila and I just celebrated our 35th anniversary. It's amazing. It's always a great day, an anniversary. It makes me glad I married Sheila, and I get that rush and feeling that if I could go back in time, I'd do it all over again and be even more excited knowing now how things turned out. What's awkward for me is not only sharing this personal information, but also to let you know that every once in a while I get an idea to write a poem. And they always turn out to be pretty rudimentary. I don't have that kind of poet's way with words. And I've only finished a handful, and most stay hidden and in private. I put one in my book accidentally, and I'm about to tell you another. So soon after I moved into that dorm room back in 1992 to go to school, being apart, and soon after absence had me thinking more about our relationship, I realized something. It started to take shape in a poem that took a couple months to put together. And you might think I stole the idea from Twilight and the song about being in love with a woman for 1,000 years and waiting for her. But in fairness, I wrote my poem in 1992, and Twilight wasn't written for another 10 years or so. But the sentiment is similar. I realized Sheila was the woman I dreamed of so long ago. And I suspect many of us feel that way when we find the person who's perfect for us. So for those of you who read my book, you'll also better understand the dedication at the front. So as an anniversary present, I'm going to read my poem to Sheila. It's called Discovery at a Distance. Once, she has accompanied me in one form or another, as far back in my thoughts as I can remember. At first, little more than a mist or a haze, a soothing warm feeling in my earliest days. She began to appear in a familiar shape. Still, the vision would quickly evaporate. Perfect and pure, a divine creation, enlarged by an unbridled imagination. Eventually, a transfiguration occurred. From the shell of a goddess, a woman emerged. I learned how to summon her image at will, to bask in her beauty. I remember it still. But slowly, with age, delight turned to fear. Apprehension arose when her image appeared. I suspected this woman could never love me, and conquered by doubt, I dared no longer dream. Now, separated by circumstances much of the time, not a moment goes by without you on my mind. Alone in the distance I struggle to cope, invoking your image to kindle my hope. In this faraway place, I would never have thought that I'd learned the lesson I've been taught. Never before had I made the connection. You were the focus of my youthful reflections. Yours was the image I secretly cherished. Then, driven by doubt, the image I banished. My original passion was no futile desire. My self-deprecation was never required. Your love, your trust, your faith in me has given me the strength I need. There are no more dreams I dare not dream. You've opened up the world to me. It's me.
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
It's Sheila and John.
Here we are.
And we love talking about art. We love talking about different kinds of art, dance and music and all kinds of stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of our shows have been about paintings, but we're not going to talk about that today. We're talking about the performance type stuff. Mm-hmm. What I want to talk about is this experience you and I had when we went to Ireland in 2018. Mm-hmm. And we were close to a small town called Roundstone in County Galway. It was right on the ocean, and it was, an hour and a half north of Galway. We were trying to find something to do, and we found some itineraries, and it turned out that there was going to be a show on the Saturday night at the local Roundstone Community Center.
Now, this community was incredibly tiny.
Very
how
small.
many people do you think it was?
I have no idea.
So when we were told about this show, I was expecting it to be more of a local talent. I don't know, like a tiny talent show, kids.
Well, yeah, I wasn't sure what to expect. I actually thought the opposite. I thought it was kind of a once a year type thing, or maybe once a season type thing, and people would come from all over. But didn't know what to expect.
Right.
So then I remember though, when we were waiting in line, you in particular were struck because you saw a couple young dancers coming in. And you've seen so many dancers over the years. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh no, like from what I'm seeing here, it's going to be like
a recital,
hokey doke recital. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, we went in, and it was a very community center type seating, but it was full.
It was full.
The whole community showed up.
Yeah.
And in short, it blew our minds.
Blew our minds.
It was incredible. And, just in terms of the setting, first of all, before we describe why I want to talk about it, there was one group of, I'm going to say 6 to 8 musicians.
Mm-hmm. These performers played multi-instruments.
Right. So
they didn't just play one. They played 3 or 4 different types of instruments, which was...
And a real mix of ages.
Yeah, a real mix of ages, like from teenagers to at least 60.
And it was beautiful music. It was
beautiful.
There was an MC, a woman who was the MC, and I guess she was in charge of their local association, like music association. And she was always calling everybody by their first name. And you could tell that everybody in the whole place knew everybody.
Knew everyone. And she knew them. And she talked about their parents or their, or their kids or their, what they were doing that day. And they ran. It was really funny.
So what struck me, and the reason I want to talk about this is because I was seeing art in a completely different way, which was, I did not get the impression that the people who were performing that night were doing it to be pros, were doing it strictly for the performance side. It was just people, you could tell, who had music as part of their everyday life. They had
part of their heritage and
as part of their community.
Yeah, and it's really did part of the family. I mean, like a lot of these were families that it went down from generation to generation, that they were dancers or singers or instrumentalists, and they seemed to almost do it often.
The other thing I thought was really cool too is, so, I'd be sitting, let's say, here's one example. I was sitting, let's say 10 or 15 people from a young woman. She looked to be about 15 or 16, and she looked really shy. She kind of had her head down and she was listening. And at a certain point, the MC said, oh, Sheila, why don't you come up and do your song? And you could, she was kind of shy, and I'm like, oh no, she doesn't really want to do it. She gets on stage, and as soon as it's her turn to start, her head comes up and she starts singing in the most musical, amazing voice. Like,
amazing.
It was like, this is like a professional singer.
Yeah.
And then they finish and they just kind of put their head down and go back to their seat again.
It was so cute.
But again,
it's like, my goodness.
Obviously people, and so many of the people, and the whole family played an instrument, or the whole family sung. And then there was this really cool, you got to tell the story about, so one of the 6 or 8 people who was playing music all night, we'd seen all this great dancing.
Right.
And then somebody said something like, can't Liam dance?
Yeah.
So tell them what happened after that.
Yeah, because they're like, what about Liam? Is Liam going to dance? And Liam was playing instruments. He was on the stage playing all these different instruments. And he was like, well, I got to get my shoes on. You got to give me time to get my shoes on. And all of a sudden, all the little dancers, because there were a few little dancers that performed too, but like all of them came running up to the front. And I knew...
Yeah, can I just interrupt? Because this was interesting, because I didn't notice anything. But all of a sudden, Sheila said, I'm getting a better view.
Yes.
And I'm like, why? She goes, don't you see this? Everybody in the room just perked up.
Yeah.
And all the young girls just ran to the front. I'm getting a good view.
Yeah. And not only that, he didn't want to dance on the stage. He was like, it's not big enough. Like the stage wasn't strong enough or big enough. He was like, I'm going to go on the floor. So I knew that this is going to be amazing. And it was the best Irish dancing I'd ever seen in my life. And I have actually seen professional dancers. Like I saw Lord of the Dance, and the height that he got in his legs and his jumping. And it was just, I was blown away. And to see the little kids just like looking at him. And
you could tell the whole community was enriched. Like they were all smiling. And it wasn't because they were proud in the sense that, look, we have this. It was just like, wow, art is wonderful. Community is wonderful. It was just such a great feeling.
It really was.
And it just reminds me that the arts, it's just such an important part of community life.
Yeah. And back to Newfoundland now. When we went to Newfoundland,
Right. So you, just to place it, in the last little while, you took a trip to Newfoundland with your sisters.
Yeah. And we went to a place called Fairyland because I found this dinner theater there, and I was expecting it to be kind of similar, right? Because we did that in Ireland and it was a small community. So we went to this dinner theater and it was very similar. This little theater, the whole community came out. It was like a full house. And this was actually a play, with some singing. They did a little bit of singing in there, and it was very joyful too. It was really fun to be part of the community and just to partake in that. I really felt like it was special.
I think back to myself 20 years ago, you would hear about cutting arts funding, and that comes up all the time.
Yeah.
And my thinking back then, I hate to admit, was, yeah, that makes sense. Like, art is superfluous. It's like, it's like something extra. Like, if we can get to it, great, but we can't afford it.
It's too bad.
And now I've got the completely opposite view, which is, if you don't do anything else, make sure you keep art as part of an enriching part of the community.
Yes.
I mean, wellness is so important.
Yes. And it's part of wellness.
You need safe roads. You need safe communities. You need a whole bunch of things to make for a happy, comfortable community. You need art. Mm-hmm. You have to find budget room for art. This was you, not me. But when our kids were little, it was so important that you put them in things like kinder music and Suzuki or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And now I realize how critical that was. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, I don't think of that when they have young kids.
Right. It's important. Like, I read that it actually uses a different part of their brain.
Right.
Like, for kids, it helps develop different parts of their brain. So it really helps in their education. It helps them see things differently and learn things.
So I'm just so happy I went to the community center in Roundstone in 2018.
Great memory.
And saw this amazing performance, and it really has changed my whole perspective on the arts. Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And it's sign-off time. We have Sheila, Sammy, and John. So I had some things going on last week. I went to a lovely show, Spring Awakening. So it was very nice, by KWMP and Agnew Acting Studio. That was fun. And John and I celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary this weekend, which was very romantic.
Yeah, we had a great weekend. I really enjoyed it.
And what about you, Sammy? What do you have going on?
Well, this week coming up, I am really looking forward to some me time.
Oh, very good.
Yes, because I was away this weekend with all my friends and I love them so much, but sometimes I need time to myself. So I'm going to do that.
Especially because like the week before you were with a whole other family too.
Yeah, exactly. And also the week before I went and saw the Harry Potter play. So Spring Awakening, Harry Potter. It was amazing. Like, would recommend if you can get tickets in Toronto. They're here for a while. So try to get tickets. It's really good.
And is it a musical?
It's not a musical, but there is music in it. It's kind of like, the Harry Potter movies where they have the background magical music.
Yes.
But it's a play. And I actually didn't know that because it's put on by Mervish and I just assumed it was a musical. But the actors were amazing and the special effects were insane. So I've had definitely a busy couple weeks. So I'm really looking forward to just hang out, me, myself, and I. How about you, John?
Well, good luck with that.
So, I'll try.
So I do have lots going on, but I want to just talk a little bit about training and running and just keeping on going because I ran into a glitch. So I'm getting closer and closer to marathon date. And this is the time where I have my biggest mileage. And meanwhile, I had an injury that I thought I had resolved, but it was still tweaking a little bit. And then I had a bad experience where I went out on Thursday. Something happened. It just went wrong. So I had to cut it a bit short, which I hate doing. And then I was getting ready for my Sunday run. And, one thing that running's really taught me that I absolutely love is just keep going. Just keep moving forward. Just keep trying. You don't think you're going to make it, but you can. And so in this particular instance, I had to do a long 32K run. And I wasn't sure what was going to happen. And sure enough, when I did the first few kilometers, it felt just like Thursday. Terrible. But I'm like, just keep going. Just keep going. And sure enough, the music kicked in. I forgot about the problems, and about 5 or 6 kilometers later, I'm like, okay, I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm going to keep moving forward. And sure enough, I got the whole run done. It's a bit stiff after, but if nothing else, running has really taught me that in tough times, if you just keep moving forward, it's amazing that what you'll accomplish, what you don't think you can. So it's been a bad and good week.
Excellent. And I have a few anniversaries to shout out to because it's our anniversary. But Elise and Stephen celebrated their anniversary on Saturday, and Cheryl and Blair celebrated their anniversary. And Kim and David celebrating their anniversary. So there's lots of people celebrating.
And Dawn and Jenny's is coming up as well.
Well, no, that's October, but...
Oh, it's just because they were both on 35.
35, yeah.
Right. Okay, well, that was amazing. A great week. Hope you enjoyed the episode and look forward to doing another one next week.
See ya.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.